basically just tried to make the most out of this change in our industry and tried to enable it as much as possible as we head away from time cost, paper, and being paid for data inputs into focusing on hopefully what we all went to university for, which is trying to figure out how to help a small business spend that last dollar they have for the greatest utilization rate. So spend the last buck to make the biggest impact.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. I am your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a great one. Our guest is the co-founder and CEO of Practice Ignition, which is an accounting automation solution. Guy Pearson, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Mike. It's great to be here. Hopefully everyone can understand my accent, but if not, bear with us and I'm sure we'll have a transcriber or a transcript underneath the podcast.
We definitely will. It'll get everybody will get used with the language from down under, which I don't know. Like you probably I don't know if there'd be any listener that wasn't familiar with Crocodile Dundee. You're probably cringing the fact that I even brought that up.
Sorry, mate. I'm not packing a knife today, so it's safe on this side of the podcast here in Toronto.
Exactly. Well, I'll tell you, when I grew up watching that. You know, what was portrayed in that movie and as well, Mad Max.
Yep.
You know, I went and lived in Australia for a couple of years. And when I went there, I thought, wow, it was this kind of desolate land down under. And it's not that at all. It's probably one of the most beautiful places in the world. And so anyways, we won't get too far down that track, but I'm sure most of our listeners love the nostalgic accent of Australia.
Yeah, perfect. It is a bit more like Crocodile Dundee than Mad Max. So, yeah, sort of both of them are not quite accurate depictions. But yeah, don't think that we're either going to kill everybody in the desert or you're going to get stuck in the middle of nowhere with crocodiles and big knives.
Exactly.
You're safe to come visit anytime.
Exactly. So this brings up a great question is we'd love to know a little bit more about you and how you came to be the co-founder of Practice Ignition. Tell us about your career journey leading up to this point.
I'm going to try and keep this incredibly brief, so not to waffle too much. But long story short, started out in accounting at what we call work experience. I'm not sure if you have that here in Canada, but effectively during school holidays in grade 10, you go find a place of employment to volunteer your time to sort of gain some experience and as part of your school curriculum. And so lucky me, I like numbers and people. So went to an accounting firm who accepted me in my local area in Sydney, Australia, and then kept going back for paid work every school holiday break thereafter for the next couple of years. So I finished high school, and before I sat I'm not sure the Canadian equivalent, but SATs or our HSC back home, was offered a job whilst I was going to study at university. So did, I guess, a cadetship at one firm for 4 years. It was a very top-down structured firm, learned all about tax compliance, looked after rugby players, professional surfers, that sort of client base, and mostly just learned how to file tax returns and GST returns. Decided that wasn't quite the path I wanted to go on and change firms, progressed to look after people who would, a few years later go on to be in the Aussie equivalent of the Dragons on Dragon's Den, so looking after their private enterprises. At that job, I sat next to my partner, who was in his 60s, incredibly successful, but didn't have sort of the receptionist security force around him for his time. And so I got to learn a lot and ultimately got to put my hand up for a lot of things. So at the ripe old age of 23, I was running graduate recruitment, running the conferences internally for the firm. I put my hand up to do business development activities, and actually started to have a say in how the firm was run and culture and all those sorts of things. And, at the ripe old age of 24, was running my own team, and then went on to be offered partnership by the end of my 24th year, which is a great achievement for myself, but ultimately decided that I wanted to get into I guess, a bit more of the small business. I'd seen Xero coming from New Zealand, which is just across the water from Australia. Skype, which we're currently using right now, is the online telephony technology of the day in sort of 2008, 2009. Google had just announced Google Suite. And all these things are kind of coming into fruition. And I thought about the future of what entrepreneurs wanted to do and how they wanted to interact. And shoeboxes, manila folders, and face-to-face meetings for everything were not quite where I thought the world was going. So left that firm before it listed on the stock exchange. Did like all good accountants, or perhaps all good Australian accountants, and went and spent my money traveling the world just after the GFC in 2009. So I went to Africa, Europe, North America, came back, started working for a brewery at night. Don't know what the equivalent would be, I guess maybe steam whistle or whatnot here, pouring beers and kicking off one of the world's first cloud accounting firms called Interactive Accounting during the days. So worked 100 hours for the next couple of years, started 5 companies in 3 years, the last being Practice Ignition. Took myself out of the day-to-day of running interactive accounting, and then decided that Practice Ignition was where I wanted to focus all my efforts. So Interactive was quite a unique success story, built a USP, or a unique selling proposition, to e-commerce and software startups in the venture capital industry in Australia, mostly servicing those businesses that were going overseas as small companies in their ownership structures, and also servicing foreign startups coming to Australia. But inside that, and some of the lessons we learned along the way before PI was, if we don't have good data, we can't do advisory. We can't do advisory. We can't do board packs. We can't do board packs. We can't help anyone grow their business. And so we actually pulled in a bookkeeping unit very, very early on. First off, it was me doing the bookkeeping, and then we hired CAs as they were sort of going through graduation or a few years under the belt. We put them back into bookkeeping and management accounting, financial directorship, controllership, and really tried to get the systems and data flowing automated from clients' payables all the way through to those board packs and those dashboards, so we could have meaningful conversations with our clients. And so the firm today, just still sitting on the board of, has about 20 staff in Sydney and Melbourne. I think about 25% of the team is in the bookkeeping or management accounting division. And, trying to run that firm and switch to let's call it a monthly fixed fee for the recurring things that we did every month that were exactly the same. As we scaled up, became incredibly difficult trying to connect the letter of engagement to workflow invoicing and payments. And that's kind of where Practice Ignition came from. My firm was only ever going to look after a small segment of the world's customers and small businesses. So those systems that we currently used at the time didn't want to build all those connected architecture or systems, despite me begging profusely and myself being stubborn enough. I went out to go and build this software, having never built a piece of software other than a website before. And what are we at? 7 years later, 70 plus people, $30 million more in venture capital raised. We're now here with this product, taking it to the world, and I'm lucky enough to be helping expand the Northern Hemisphere team out of Toronto for the next couple of months. Ironically, I'm off to Manchester to lead our roadshow with the ACCA, which would be like CPA for Canada, tonight on a 6-7 day roadshow throughout the UK, so Wales, Scotland, and the UK and England. So it's been a whirlwind journey. Myself personally, I basically just tried to make the most out of this change in our industry and tried to enable it as much as possible as we head away from time cost, paper, and being paid for data inputs into focusing on hopefully what we all went to university for, which is trying to figure out how to help a small business spend that last dollar they have for the greatest utilization rate. So spend the last buck to make the biggest impact. So that's me in accounting, starting my own firm. Practice Ignition to hopefully help firms run a better business so they don't have debtors, they don't have scope creep, they have agreed fees with their clients, so there's no surprises, so there's better relationships. And then turn some of the gains, we have what we call a self-managed 401k or self-managed super fund back home. And so basically in my retirement fund, I've been backing fintech and software companies trying to help enable this B2B software run, fintech space improvements, all those sorts of things. So neobanks in the US, cash flow reporting tools out of Europe, insurance platforms that are like Stripe to insure transactions, all kinds of things from around the world. And so very much just really trying to make the biggest impact I can with my brain of information systems, bookkeeping, accounting, and I guess financial science, for lack of a better term. That's me in a nutshell. So hopefully I haven't put you all to sleep by now. Michael, are you still there?
Yeah, I love the story. You know, you've built businesses. You then, you know, sort of, it's like this iteration of, okay, we need this, now I want to go do this, and you're following your passion, which I think is very evident. Following your passion of helping small business and being involved in this globally. But now, what I love about Practice Ignition is it solved a problem you were faced in your successful business, and then let's take that piece of software to other businesses. And it's done remarkably. And now the expansion, global expansion. I mean, Practice Ignition has been here in North America for a lot of years, but this is now a big expansion. Now you've opened your North American headquarter in Toronto. You have opened an office in the UK. Lots of stuff is going on with your business. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing when people like our listeners implement Practice Ignition. What does that do for their business?
So typically what happens is, like e-commerce has Shopify, great Canadian company. And then you've got on the subscription billing side, so like for Practice Ignition, we can use Stripe or Recurly to run our business. And both of those systems and business models are tied to a contract or a source of truth that drives everything behind the scenes. So whether it's user permissions and invites, it also connects to accounting for the invoicing, and the payments is all tied in. And so you never really get anyone chasing you for payment of an e-commerce good, right? So, you pay, good is shipped, everyone's happy. Software, you pay, you get the software you've asked for, everyone's happy. In services, it's like sometimes you get a contract, then you pay, the customer doesn't pay. Typically, the services business does the work of what they think the client wants. Perhaps it hasn't been a signed contract where it's all itemized. And then they deliver the service to the client, and if they're not happy, maybe they don't pay, or maybe you write off half the business, right? So that whole contract billing payment is a very murky set of waters and makes it really hard to build a good, transparent, clear relationship with the client. And I find that, in my journey, what I've seen is most people like talking to their Uber driver more than they do their CPA or their chartered accountant, which is scary, given that we're supposed to be a trusted advisor. And so what we're seeing when people roll out Practice Ignition is there's clear terms and pricing and services to be delivered, agreed on up front. That then removes the notion of debtors being a problem later, even if part of the fees are charged in advance. They deliver the service, client is already contracted in to pay the fee, so that's not a problem. And the client gets what they paid for. Now, if the client changes their mind, which we all know that they never do, no, kidding, they do quite regularly, you can vary the agreement, the client signs off on the adjustment, they know what they're going to be charged for it, and they get what it is they paid for. And so we tend to find is accounts receivable typically goes to zero because just like every other business model in the world, contract is linked to invoice and payment for delivery of good or service using PI. And the other part is that scope creep is better managed. And so the loss of, let's call it hourly billing for scary terminology, but that fee that you might miss out on because you haven't asked the client or told the client how much something additional is going to cost, and now becomes really easy to manage. It takes about 30 seconds. You can call the client, they can view the additional work, they can sign off on it, and the terms and the payments that go with it. And so typically what we find is accounts receivable goes to zero, scope creep ceases to exist, and that miscommunication or client satisfaction actually increases because they know what it is they're going to actually receive for what their payment is. There's no more sort of surprise bills. Now, amongst everything else in terms of efficiencies and workflow, the ability to connect and automate other systems, those two things around profitability, cash flow, payments, and client happiness are typically the things that we see increase the most or decrease in the case of accounts receivable. So that's a very basic play, but it does make a whole lot of sense when you think about how all those other businesses run, i.e. e-commerce and software subscription businesses. And basically, we're just bringing that into the services industry, and so you see the same results.
It's fantastic. And so with that, you take a big swath of the noise that happens in any business, and you're reducing that. I mean, you said it, accounts receivable goes to zero and pretty much an end to scope creep. I mean, solving those two problems alone, it's like, what other problems do we have? Almost none, right?
Yeah.
Those are...
training stuff, finding good stuff, all those things we can't really help with. What we can do is tell you what your revenue will be for the year. So you can plan for that because everything's contracted. You can bubble up the data. So even that problem we solve in some way, shape, or form. So
yes.
I think it just makes a lot of sense, right?
Absolutely, it does. Now, tell me a little bit about you mentioned you opened and ran your own arm of a bookkeeping business inside of your still existing business that you sit on the board of. But what was that journey like starting the bookkeeping side of the business, and how has it gone? Because I would think it'd be interesting for others to hear that journey.
Yeah, for sure. It basically came out of the need. We were trying to offer a virtual CFO service at the accounting firm. And we kept running into the fact that relying on either internal, let's start from the beginning, relying on the owner of the small business to do the bookkeeping accurately. And we're talking about accruals bookkeeping, not just entering something as it comes in, like entering it so that you've got proper accruals to do board packs and advisory. That was unreliable at the best of times. I mean, they're supposed to be focused on doing and running their business, not admin. The second part was if there was a third-party bookkeeping firm, and bear in mind we're talking about 2011, that they perhaps weren't up to date with online technology back then. And so we're finding that trying to find reliable bookkeeping as a third party that could scale, I could work full-time or could take on the next 20 clients we were bringing on, was hard because obviously it wasn't our business. So it's very hard to sort of ask someone to do something that they don't want to do. So they want to work 3 days a week and they're amazing, but you have enough work for 5 days a week. You can't force that. So I completely respect that, but that didn't suit us. And so we ended up, going, well, let's try and find a graduate or someone with a couple of years experience who wants to become a CA or wants to move into advisory or tax later on, or maybe just wants to move in financial controllership or stay in management accounting. Let's try and find those people to come on board so we can get this good data from the source that is entered in accruals methodology so that we can actually do the board packs for these businesses that are looking to scale and have cash flow problems. Because rapidly scaling businesses, although it may seem incredibly successful from the outside, typically have the greatest need for more capital because they're spending money to acquire customers, which is great. Customers are growing like a freight train, amazing. But ultimately the payback period on the marketing spend to when they get the revenue from the new customer as they grow extends out. And that's why, particularly in startup land where we played, where our clients were, we had a big problem where we needed to make sure the data was accurate so we could advise them on when they were going to need to raise capital, when they needed to make a payment arrangement with the supplier, all those sorts of things. And we just found that we needed to roll out that bookkeeping arm to be able to provide that in, people don't want to wait 3 months for you to tell them that they're about to run out of money. That's a really bad set of advisory services, right? So we needed to know, at least every week where they were sitting. And that's part of the reason why we brought it in-house. We wanted to make sure that we were bringing in qualified people to do it. And, everyone's like, oh, you surely can't make money doing that. And the answer was, well, we definitely could. So we fixed feed our bookkeeping services based on the number of transactions. And then we just went to work on trying to make that service as efficient as possible. So what software can we layer in? What are the new technology updates? How do we want our clients to operate so that we can do this in an efficient manner and then we can scale that up? And as we got more efficient, didn't have to hire an additional person. We just bring on another client, which would go straight to the bottom line. And so our bookkeeping arm of the business has always been incredibly profitable. The client's happy because it's fixed. They don't worry about it and it's cheaper than what they used to pay, their dad's friend who was a part-time bookkeeper or whatnot. So standardization basically meant fixed costs that seemed cheap to the entrepreneur. And for us, it meant greater profitability because we were focusing on making that business more efficient.
Remarkable. It speaks a lot to a customer experience, even when, for our listener, if you're growing your business and you say to somebody, well, look, I only have this many hours, and somebody perceives you like, build a relationship with other tax accountants that essentially need the service that guy was trying to build into his business. Well, that right there is what's limiting taking on those partnerships because they see a ceiling. It's like you wanted to have bookkeepers that would be able to come up, do the quality work, and be able to take on the demand that you deliver to them. So figuring out how to be able to deliver that and have that part of your proposition to partners is a big deal. You need to have the systems and processes in place that you can scale such that your partners, your problem of scale doesn't become their problem of scale.
Oh, 100%. And if you can nail that, it's a huge benefit. I mean, I know that you're part of the pure bookkeeping organization, and that's one of the biggest benefits there is, standardization, learning, everything that comes with it, and also the ability to have a trusted network that you can work with to scale up if you want to be your independent own operator. And so I think it's a huge thing. It's one of the things we massively struggled with. That's why we brought it in-house. It wasn't because we didn't like the people that we dealt with. It's just we gave them one client, we gave them 2 clients, and that was their capacity. And it's like, well, that's not good. Now we have to go find somebody else that's up to the standards that we want. It was incredibly difficult back, almost coming up on 10 years ago.
Remarkable. Well, it's great news, and it's also news that comes with work, which is there's work to be done. Understand the technology, understand how things are changing, and the technology that can help leverage the work that you're doing so that you build scale, or can build in scale and build capacity like you've done. Now, Practice Ignition is definitely one of those apps that I'm hearing our customers, clients in pure bookkeeping leverage Practice Ignition to give them capacity. I mean, every minute you spend trying to capture money and the profitability that goes away if you aren't managing scope creep, I mean, you take that away. Well, what do you do with that time? And what do you do with the improved profitability as you get to scale your business better? So that's one super advantage, I think, of Practice Ignition. What about other tools? I mean, if we're going to sit down and say, well, how can I leverage the cloud to scale my business? What are some of the other tools that you've used that have enabled your success?
Oh, wow. So there's sort of a whole, I mean, I don't want to go on forever, but there's a few different segments. So there's how do you run your business? So from appointment setting to online calls to email and documents and how you store things, and even some naming formats on files that you can easily find them. So there's that side of things. So like Calendly for me is amazing. Google Suite has always been my choice of office tools because it allows for interaction on things like spreadsheets and documents from day one in real time in the cloud. And then we use Zoom mostly internally for calls, and then Slack for internal communication. So those things really help on the comms side, and to take away internal emails in a large company, Slack is great. We then have Confluence as an internal database, if you like, or what would you call it? Intranet. Going back in the day, it's the equivalent of SharePoint, but it's built for, like BHP or Bank of America, like it's built to scale. And it's relatively cheap and available in the cloud. Then you've got the accounting side. So payables really depends on the problem you're trying to solve. I would never, ever just look at the price. I think that's the wrong way to think about software, because if you think about your hourly rate, which is how you should value your time, if you still have a measure of that, then it doesn't have to save a lot of time for a piece of software to be incredibly valuable. I used Receipt Bank from very, very early on at my accounting firm from 2009, I want to say. We used Xero as a ledger. Bear in mind, QuickBooks Online did not exist globally at that point, so it wasn't even available in Australia in 2009. I think that happened in 2016. By then, we were sort of standardized around using Xero for our clients. Even though I say Receipt Bank, I invested in HubDoc. I love the whole idea of fetching the documents, particularly in North America with checks and bank statements not being readily available through online banking. And obviously the OCR technology the guys had and the team were amazing. And so for me, it's like get your payables, get your data into your accounting ledger. So whatever payable tool or tools, we used to have some clients that would have HubDoc and Receipt Bank together because we didn't want to have to fetch or collect all the online invoices that software tools have where they make you log in to go get it. So we'd have the two in conjunction with each other, because it was still cheaper than paying someone to do those functions. Then we had Xero as a ledger. Like I said, we used QBO. We standardized everything around Xero at my accounting firm on a legacy basis. And then we moved into reporting. Now, if I was running my accounting firm today, I'd be looking at which reporting tool best suits all the clients. And arguably, I'd probably suggest you need a firm subscription to all of them. Now, the reason I say that is depending on the size of the firm, you have many clients who are in many different divisions on many different sizes. There's probably going to be the kind of reporting you need from different tools for different segments of your client base. Now, if you can't communicate to your clients using a tool, don't shoehorn those results into that tool, find another one. So, for instance, we used Fathom in the early days, mostly for the goal seek analysis and the early stage clients that we had. And what it did was it brings in all the data from the ledger and allows you to do a sensitivity analysis. So transaction volume and pricing, both on sales and purchaser side, for you to figure out what levers you can pull to hit your goal. So you'd set your goal on the goal seek analysis, profitability, cash flow, whatever it was. And then it would tell you what you needed to do, just in percentage terms, around changing pricing or volume of certain things to be able to hit your targets. So it's very, very helpful to kick off that advisory discussion. Now, that only works if you do accruals. So on the flip side of that, Float is an amazing tool for cash flow. I think they solve such a huge problem for a unique segment of the market, so much so that I invested in the last capital raise. Once again, trying to back what I believe in. So Float's amazing when you've got people who perhaps don't do accruals. So if you're doing mostly cash flow and running a business based on the cash balance, but you want a budget and the ability to go where above, below, and why, it's amazing for that. So you've got that at, I guess, the cash level, Fathom, Spotlight reporting, Futurely at the accruals level. And then when you start to get into the higher level, you've got, Microsoft BI when you're connecting custom data sources, or we use Mode internally. And basically it's SQL databases, which, you need to basically be able to code, which I cannot do, to build queries across multiple databases. So for instance, it might be your accounting data in there with your application data as a software company. So users, customers, customer habits, usage, to then try and build reports and understand the client base and predict the future. And sorry, I'm rambling on a little bit there, but I just wanted to cover off the core elements of payables, ledger, and reporting. And then the thing that accountants and bookkeepers tend to overlook the most is, where does the entrepreneur or our client spend the majority of their day? So, for instance, in inventory management, it's going to be inventory-based business. It'll be in the inventory management system. So you need to get your hooks in and access into that inventory management system and understand what are the things that impact that business, because that entrepreneur doesn't really care so much about what happened last month. He wants to know what lead indicators can you help pull to tell them about what's going to happen next month and next quarter, and how can you set goals and how they're tracking against those. And you're going to get that data from where they spend their day-to-day. So typically inventory management system, if you're in e-commerce or any sort of physical good. If it's in software, it's going to be their billing engine and reporting directly off the billing and talking about churn and different metrics there. If it's in services, you're going to be talking about new clients and projects. So it might be a mix of recurring retainers versus project work and what's in the pipe and capacity planning. And this is why I think bookkeepers particularly have the greatest opportunity, because naturally you just sit closer to the entrepreneur. Accountants are still wedded to tax. And so I think the ability for you to push yourself from bookkeeper through to trusted advisor, management accountant, CFO is a hell of a lot more available, because you're not as wedded. And what I've seen in North America particularly is this tax season notion that seems to exist. And, basically I feel like you set yourselves up for failure a little bit because no one speaks to their client during the year. Less prevalent in Canada, more so in the US. And so I think that's a huge opportunity for the bookkeeping fraternity in North America to be able to take that by the horns and really go after getting into that data and understanding how the data they can see today in those operating systems allows them to help project and understand the business models of what's going to impact the future for the entrepreneur. Anyway, that's my rant. That was way too long.
I love it. I think there's so much gold inside of everything you've said. There's a few things I want to bring and highlight. By chance, this episode is airing the week of QuickBooks Connect San Jose, which the theme this year is Own the Future. And I mean, you've basically highlighted one of the biggest opportunities our listeners are sitting on top of right now, is the ability to help their clients, small, medium-sized businesses, predict the future. Well, if you want to help, essentially you want to help your clients own the future, and you do that by helping them predict the future with reporting and information and data. And such an exciting message from you about the opportunity that there is for bookkeepers to really be the trusted advisor, the consultant that helps them solve this problem, and due to the fact that they are so directly connected with the owners, with the entrepreneur that is at the head of this. So Incredible. And so you mentioned one other thing that I would be interested is that you said their value, a person's value. Do they understand what their hourly rate really? And there's so much talk about value pricing. Can you speak a little bit more about that to get some clarity around what you meant by that?
Sure. People talk about valuing their time, right? In terms of will they or won't they do something, opportunity cost. Now, I'm not a big fan of using hourly rates to bill. Very much in terms of opportunity cost. It's almost like I have 50 grand in savings. Do I borrow money to buy a car or do I buy that car in cash? Like it's that kind of mentality, right? And so people don't think about if they implemented technology, in some cases, they look at the cost of the software. And it's like, that's fine. So let's say, I don't know, pick a tool where they might have 10 clients at $250 a month. And you're just focused on the $250 a month rather than, wait a sec, how much time do I get back? And how many more clients could I sign up if I use this tool and paid that $250 a month? Because if that $250 allows you to bill an extra $2,500 for the month, you should do that, right? Makes incredibly logical sense, right? Without having to work any additional hours. And I think in my mind, I just see a lot of people getting caught up on the price of that. And typically when I'm up on stage, if I'm lucky enough to speak at a conference, I talk about the fact that inside the exhibit hall outside, depending on who's there, there's usually a mixture between 500 million and $1 billion worth of R&D spent last year on trying to make your lives easier in terms of how you run your firm. So the fact that you're ignoring that in terms of rolling out new features or adopting software where that is their intent, right? Because they want you to stay a customer, and then they do that by delivering more value. It is somewhat of a misdemeanor on our parts as bookkeepers and accountants. And so very much I want people to think about it as an investment in their future, or the investment to either do one or two things. Bill more because they can have more clients in whilst not working any additional hours, or alternatively be like, you know what? I don't care about working additional hours. I'm going to spend more time with my family, friends, playing hockey. What's another great Canadian pastime? Eating poutine. I don't know. Throwing random things out there right now. But, it's that's the choice to make, right? And that's why I view it as opportunity cost.
Beautiful. And I think more need to be thinking that way. We all do, especially in the way the industry is going. There's an investment to make in all these tools. You mentioned so many different tools. They all come with a cost, but if used correctly, they come with incredible returns on investment. And if you're not investing in your business, well, your business isn't having investment made. Guy, this has been absolutely excellent. This episode, as I mentioned, is happening the week of QuickBooks San Jose, which is exciting. And I know there's a big party. It's probably already happened because we release our episodes on Tuesday. So it's actually maybe even, I think it's Tuesday. Is it Tuesday night or Monday night?
I'm pretty sure it's Tuesday night. I'm unfortunate not to be going this year. I mean, the plus side of growing a team is then we get to send other people to go and enjoy these things. So I think, where is this thing? I believe it's on the Tuesday. Clearly I'm down pat. And the other upside of growing a team is that you're not always aware of where everybody is at every given point in time, which is also a beautiful realization as things get bigger. So let me tell you when the party is, so I can get that up. Super excited this is coming out during QuickBooks Connect. Biggest piece of advice from me, having been to the show around the world. I think I've been to 10 or 12. Make sure that you get around and see the vendors and explore all the technology you can use in your business, both for yourself internally in your business and also for your clients, and how you can help solve client problems. And the other thing I tend to find is just the networking with your peers is amazing. So learning from those around you. And lastly, learning from the speakers. So there's some amazing speakers that rock up. And so, mix up a little bit of the, they've had Shaq and Oprah in the past. I don't know who's speaking this year, but mix a little bit of that in with how do I get out of my comfort zone to grow my business and improve my future. And they tend to have a great mix of both those sorts of talks around self-change and sort of, dealing with yourself and learning and growing. So I think that's the biggest takeaways you can have from something like QuickBooks Next. So make sure you enjoy it.
Beautiful. And what's wonderful is you've not only attended these conferences as a person who has a technology that helps the people in the audience, but you're also always looking for technology to grow the business. You're running your own multiple businesses. So I think it's incredibly valuable recommendation. And I think it can be overwhelming. There's a big conference. There's so many, there's going to be 5,000 people there, so many different vendors. You can start with Practice Ignition. You already know a little bit about what Practice Ignition does. So if you are listening to this episode while you're at QuickBooks San Jose, get over to the Practice Ignition booth. Wonderful people. Everybody that works for Practice Ignition are great people. They're friendly. They'll help you get started with some technology that's going to give you a huge lift to your business and lots of learning there. So make sure you do that. You mentioned speakers. I'm fortunately speaking at QuickBooks San Jose. So I'm looking forward to it. The topic is the 10 things the most successful bookkeepers will be doing in 2020. And one of those things is actually helping your clients own the future. So we've already started to even share a little bit about why that's so important and what better place to be on the planet really than at QuickBooks Connect, where you can go and learn about all the different technology that's going to help you do better in your business for yourself, but as well help your clients win with technology, because they certainly don't have the time to go figure all this stuff out. So you do it first and then bring that to your clients. Such a great opportunity. Guy, this has been great. If there's anything else you'd like to share, to get people learning more about Practice Ignition, I'd love to hear that and share that with our audience.
Yeah, for sure. So look, practicenation.com, there's free trials that last 14 days, which can be extended if you need them. Read all the reviews on the apps.com store, or if you're on the Xero side, the Xero community, even just Google or other reviews. And basically everything that, you've heard me say that the software can do. So reduce accounts receivable days to 0, improve your profitability, gives you time back, will all be splattered across all those review sites. So, biggest comment typically is, why didn't we do this 2 years earlier? So please, we built a piece of software out of lessons learned from running one of the first cloud accounting and bookkeeping businesses in the world. My whole agenda is to get it here to everyone's hands so that you can better run your firm and focus more on your clients. So it's my altruistic hope and goal, the whole reason I became an accountant in the first place. So check it out, practicenation.com. If you're at QuickBooks Connect, make sure you get to the stands. Otherwise, reach out to one of the team. We're all over the world, so you shouldn't have any trouble finding us.
Beautiful. Guy, this has been absolutely awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Not only sharing about Practice Ignition, but sharing so much about your journey and what's helped you to be successful. Absolute gold. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks, guys.
And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.